Hello everyone and welcome to this week's edition of Women's World. Today we'll be talking about a very important topic, that is the improvement in the Egyptian economy. Of course, also we'll be relating this to Africa and how Egypt can partner more with Africa in terms of its presidency of the African Union 2019, and of course the figures that shows Egypt's economic performance improvement. We'll be talking about this very important topic with our guest today, Dr. Zeinab Nawar. She is a lecturer of economics and will also be having a special report. But first we're going to take a look at the press and we'll be right back. Welcome back, everyone. Our first item is about Councillor Sally Saidi, who became the first female judge in the criminal courts in Egypt. Councillor Sally Saidi obtained her master's and PhD degrees in international law. She holds the position of president of the court and a member of the technical court of the Criminal Court of Cassation, and she is the first criminal judge in the Egyptian criminal courts and the first female judge to serve as assistant to the president of the Court of Cassation in 2015. And some interesting sports news. The Egyptian national junior rhythmic gymnastics team flies to Moscow to participate in the first World Junior Championship. The championship is held in Moscow between July 19 and 21st, and Egypt competes in the group and individual competitions. The team for the group consists of 6 players: Mariam Ashraf, Jannah Hisham, Farida Ashraf, Lamar Shihab, Sandra Asim, and Malak Tamer. More sports news. The Egyptian synchronized swimming team qualifies for Tokyo 2020 Olympics, and they thanked all those who supported them. The Egyptian synchronized swimming team has officially qualified for the Tokyo 2020 Olympics after winning first place for Africa at the World Championship held in Korea between July 12th and 28th. And Christine Boutros, who is only 28 years old, launches the English for Hope initiative to teach English for refugees for free. In 2009, at the age of 19, Christine volunteered with some official organizations and centers that offer assistance and services to refugees in Cairo. Welcome back. Egypt's improvement in its economy is was announced by the Minister of Trade as well as the Prime Minister. The improvement figures shows Egypt's economy improving in light of the IMF also report, and we have more details in this report. Egypt's economy achieved positive results during the 2018-2019 fiscal year, with a growth of 5.6% and a surplus of the first time in the state budget. The country's fiscal year starts in early July and ends in late June. This is the highest growth rate achieved in years and one of the highest in the world, said Egypt's Finance Minister Mohammed Maït, stressing that the country aims to achieve a 6% economic growth in the ongoing 2019-2020 fiscal year. He described Egypt's economic growth structure under the latest reforms as sustainable and diversified. Earlier in July, the Egyptian government applied the latest round of fuel subsidy cuts, increasing its price between 16 and 30% as a necessary measure in an economic reform program supported by a $12 billion loan from the International Monetary Fund (IMF). Maït pointed out that lifting fuel and energy subsidies gave a space for more government spending on cash support, social protection, and human development programs, and also increased the government's investments. Egypt started its IMF-supported 3-year austerity-based economic reform program in November 2016, including fuel and energy subsidy cuts, introduction of value-added tax, and devaluation of local currency. The country received so far $10 billion of the IMF total loan. Later in July, the IMF is expected to vote on providing Egypt with the last $2 billion tranche of loan. Prime Minister Dr. Mustafa Madbouli said on Wednesday that Egypt's economy grew 5.6% in the 2018-2019 fiscal year and is on the right track as it completes the IMF-backed reforms. Egypt is emerging from a 3-year economic reform program tied to the $12 billion loan from the International Monetary Fund. Madbouli said that Egypt's primary surplus stood at 2% for the fiscal year, which ended in June, and also pointed to a recent drop in inflation as positive signs. At the same time, it induces us to complete the implementation of reforms and the efforts exerted to achieve the targets of the new fiscal year, Madbouli said in a statement. Economic growth was up from 5.3% in 2017-2018 and in line with a government forecast. Inflation in Egypt, Africa's third biggest economy, slowed to single digits for the first time since the pound was floated in 2016. It had rocketed as high as 33% soon after President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi's administration said a devaluation was needed to ease severe shortages of foreign exchange and get $12 billion loan from the International Monetary Fund. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. In order to know more about the improvement in the Egyptian economy and, of course, this in relation to African trade in light of the trade agreement that was signed between Egypt and various African countries, we're very much delighted to have with us Dr. Zeinab Nawar, Lecturer of Economics. Thank you very much, Dr. Zeinab, for coming.
Thank you, my dear.
Before we go into all the details about the Egyptian economy, the field of economics is somehow a very, I would say, challenging field, especially for females. Why did you decide to study this particular field?
Actually, I see that studying economics, it's something which is make me very enjoying studying, enjoying working. What I felt, why I would like to study economics is actually to serve my country, because I was very much concerned about the poverty and the poverty problem in Egypt. And I said, why won't we just work as an economist and try to find solutions, to work on policies, to work on recommendations, whatever, to present it to the policymakers. And we need to do something for our country. And this is what made me very anxious to study economics. And I saw it as very exciting, challenging to some extent. But also working as an economist, and also at the same time I worked in the development. So my master's degree, I got it from the American University. It was jointly between economics and international development. So international development is to know about the societies, is to know about their traditions, is to know, to study sociology, anthropology, human rights. All of this will serve your studies as economist. So all of these in an integrated way had made what I have now in terms of knowledge, and in terms of course, loving my country. And I'm so happy that I'm trying to serve my country in different ways and in different means.
Of course. How do you see the current economic situation here in Egypt?
The current situation that we are having now in Egypt after the economic reform and the monetary and fiscal reform we have lately, which had gone very successful. And the second stage that we are waiting for is the structural reform, which is very important, and we had already started to implement some of it, which is the pilot of the health sector reform. We started in Port Said governorate, and of course it will be implemented for all the other and the rest governorate in Egypt. This is part of it. So what I do see, I see that we had done a good macroeconomic management, a new system of engineering for the economic system, which was a must. And we had to work on it and we had to implement it. But now when we see that we have an economic growth of 5.6%, which is good macroeconomic indicator, also the reform for the investment, the reform for the several laws, also the reform in the procedures to start a new company, several initiatives we have now for the small and medium enterprises. So we'll see that we have new hopes, and now it needs from the youth to work on themselves and to try to take an advantage from the current situation and to work and to work and to work hardly.
Yes. The importance of mega projects that have been implemented in Egypt throughout the past years and continue to be implemented. How do you see the importance of such project, and most importantly, the ordinary citizen? How can he feel the fruits or the results of such projects?
The mega project that the government of Egypt started to work on, it has a tremendous economic effect. First, if we are talking about the construction sector, for example, if we are talking about the infrastructure projects, so for the construction work, so we'll see that the less in terms of skills will work in construction work of these infrastructure projects. This creates employment. So when we are saying this, what about the ordinary people? The ordinary people who are be engaged in the construction work of these infrastructure projects, he will get an income. So I think of course we will help to reduce the poverty that is going to happen in Egypt. So lessen the poverty for those people who are working on these infrastructure projects. So there is an opportunity for employment. So I think people started to feel some of it. I know it's not an easy for the short term. Maybe it will need more time. But if we can see that how the mega project created employment for several people in these projects, how these mega projects, for example, we have the project that is linking Sinai to the Delta.
Yes.
So it's very important project because you need to work on the development of Sinai. You can't leave the Bedouin in Sinai more than this because of the terrorism attacks and the other problems that we do have.
So it's related to development, as you studied.
Yes, it will need some time. And all these mega projects would have an effect on the development for the whole of the country.
Yes.
If we are looking for the Suez Canal corridor, if we are looking for the economic free zone in the Suez Canal corridor and the projects, the reform that is doing for the maritime sector and for the ports. And also we have, for example, the Rubiki industrial city, a new Dumyat city. All of these, if you're going to link all of these, and of course the new projects and the new local development projects for Qina, for Sohag, for Asyut, so you will see the link between all of these different projects and you will see the development that is going to happen and is happening right now. But it needs some patience from people and it needs a hard work.
Yes. Dr. Zeinab, how do you see the importance of the Africa Free Trade Zone for African continent, its people, and the continent in general?
Of course, if we are talking about the free trade, Africa Free Trade Area, we are talking about a continent in which we have about 1.3 billion in terms of population. We are talking about 5.3 trillion in terms of gross domestic product and output. So having such an agreement is very important to the African countries because lowering the tariffs, it will allow the companies in these countries to export to each other. It will, of course, facilitate the trade, and of course, we know that trade creates growth. If you are talking about 5.6% growth for Egypt, so we can just imagine if we can see that how the implementation of this agreement would help to facilitate more trade for the Egyptian companies to trade inside Africa. So I think that if we had succeeded in implementation for most of the African countries, so in terms of imports and exports, so I would see that we would achieve a better economic growth. So the important thing, it's not important for just us as Egyptians, it's also important for the African countries who are lacking a lot of if we're talking about their level of education, if we're talking about their infrastructure problem, they need to work on their innovation, they need to even to do further enhancement of their companies. The interesting thing about the African Free Trade Area that I lately started to follow the debate that they have inside the African countries itself. They say, how can we just implement it? How can we get benefit from it? What can we do more? So it will help the African countries to export to each other.
And how would it help Egypt?
Of course, it will help Egypt that if I'm an Egyptian, whatever manufacturer in Egypt, I can get the material and the raw material from an African country with very low or no tariffs, and then doing the process of manufacturing inside Egypt and doing the exportation maybe to another African countries or to the rest of the world. When I do export to the rest of the world or even to do the exportation to other African countries, because I get the input or I get the raw material from the African countries with a lower price, this will give me a competitive advantage as a company. So I will export, okay, with the lower prices. So I'll have more competitive edge. This is compared with any other company or any other company in a different country.
Yes.
So of course working on this free trade area will help the Egyptian manufacturer, and also the African manufacturer will also enjoy the same as well.
Yes, and Egypt's geographic location is very distinguished also, Dr. Zeinab. It's gateway to Africa, so I believe Asian and European countries would actually exploit this unique geographic location in order to export their products to Africa through Egypt.
Of course, this is why in Egypt we started to work on a lot of projects for the Egyptian ports and for the enhancement for these ports. Why we are doing this? Because we would like to get an advantage from the increase in the amount of trade worldwide, and especially for the Asian countries. And if we link this with Africa, so you can imagine how much the added value that we can create.
Yes.
We need to support Africa, and also we need to benefit from our location.
Yes, of course. During the signing of the free trade agreement, the African Free Trade Agreement, President Abdel Fattah Sisi delivered a very important speech. He talked about various important issues. He tackled the aspirations of Egyptians and Africans in terms of economic development? How can we better utilize the resources of the African continent, and also how such a deal would actually help in minimizing a very important the issue of illegal migration, something that the African continent suffers from. How did you read the president's speech?
Of course, the president's speech was very important, but I will tell you something. The most important thing also for the president, Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, that he led Africa to a reform. I mean, when I'm talking about the African Trade Union, it's not about trade and removing the trade barriers and removing trade tariffs. It's about the macroeconomic system that has to be changed in these countries. So what actually the president had added for this, that he just made a very important point, that the African countries has to do a reform and has to do a macroeconomic reform in order to work on this free trade agreement. And this is what the president actually led Africa to do in it, which is a great taban. The speech of the president actually is trying to shed light to saying that for the African countries, that to take care that it's not easy, they have to work as much as they can for themselves. However, the fruits, all the countries will be in a win-win situation, which is very important, and all of the countries will be winners. However, they have to work, and they have to work hardly, and the road, it will not be easy for them. So this is what the president highlighted about the migration, and of course the migration to other foreign countries, which is the issue that we do have even here for Egypt. When you talk about trade, you talk about growth. So since there is growth, so there is opportunities for work, there is investment, so of course people will find jobs. So why they shall migrate to other countries?
Exactly.
Why shall they do this? So for each and every African country, if they had even tried to follow the steps that we do had in terms of macroeconomic reform, and this is what we had made, and even we can help the African countries in this. They need to work on this, and they need also to work on themselves and to solve their problems. They need to have a better infrastructure for the exporters. They need to, because they have a lot of problems related to electricity and the sources of power, which already we in Egypt, we had solved this issue. So Egypt can provide the African countries with a lot of advice and a lot of support, and at the end we will be in a win-win situation. So all the players will be winners.
Exactly. Dr. Zeinab, how will the Africa Free Trade Agreement enhance the African economy as a whole, and how would that affect certain industry in Egypt as well?
They are hoping for the implementation of the African Trade Union that to increase the inter-trade between the African countries, which is unfortunately it's about 16%, 15 to 16%, which is very small. They are hoping to increase it to 60% to inter-trade between the African countries. So you can imagine to what extent that each country can take benefit from the other country, getting the raw material in less prices, doing the manufacturing, and then export it again to another and different country. You can imagine how this will attract more investment and FDIs to the countries, to the African countries. You can imagine that how if the African countries succeeded to create an industrialization base, because most, I'm sorry to tell you this, most of the African countries, they still export the raw material and the agriculture products, and even here for Egypt, we still export some of the raw material and agriculture products, which is not the right thing to be done.
Yes.
We need to do further processing on the agricultural products.
Yes.
So if we can work on this, this will add value to the economy.
Of course.
We need to stop exporting any kind of raw material and agriculture product. We need to do a processing for the agricultural products, which is a plenty, and we have a lot of resources in Africa and even in Egypt, and we need to better usage of these resources.
Of course. Doctor, in your own opinion, how will this annual convention help create jobs also for African youth? I mean, this is this is something that needs to be done, and there has been a convention for African young people here in Egypt. Egypt hosts youth forums and youth conferences where young Africans come and talk about their aspirations. So how do you see that?
I see it in two parts, in industrialization and in innovation and technology.
Yes.
And this is what we should really tackle it and work on it.
Yes.
So when we would like to talk about a free trade area for the African countries, so we need to look for the innovation and how to invest in human factor. So we invest in infrastructure as we had done here in Egypt,
Yes.
and also the investment in the human factor, and also we have to talk about what we call capacity and excess capacity, how each country can work on their productive capacity and increase the productive capacity. How you increase the productive capacity of the country?
Yes.
Number one, to invest in humans.
Yes.
Number two, of course, the investment in other infrastructure projects and physical projects. So for the youth, and even this was part of the debate between the African countries, which
Yes.
is so nice.
Yes.
They said, yes, the President Fattah al-Sisi had led us to do this. We need to think about our human factor and our youth, which
Yes.
is...
Well, as President Sisi said, there is much that needs to be done, much work needs to be done. But for now, I'd like to thank you very much, Dr. Zeinab Nawar, lecturer of economics. Thank you very much for joining us here on MalTV International.
Thank you, thank you.
And ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being with us in this edition of Women's World. I'm Hala Al-Hamalawi signing off for now.